They say, I want to have the campaigns, laid out. It's got to be perfect. And you start to ask someone, well, why? Well, if it's not, then they're going to say no. They're not going to engage. And, there you have to point out, well, if you're not sending them anything, it's an automatic no. They're not engaging because there's nothing to engage with.
Hello and welcome. I am your host, Chris Whitling, and we got a good one for you today. So a while back, we did an episode on the basics of CRM, and that has actually become one of our most watched episodes that people are clearly returning to over and over again. And so we brought that guest back, Chuck, to talk to us about the basics of automation. Automation, CRM go hand in hand, something really close to my heart as a marketing guy. And so I am really excited for this episode. We are going to walk through basically the beginnings, like what is marketing automation, if you have no idea what we're talking about, how marketing automation can be used in various real estate sales platforms, traps and best practices, as well as what's going to happen in the future. So a little bit of something for everyone. And so as we get into this, Chuck, why don't you introduce yourself and tell people who you are and what you do?
Glad to be back. Thanks for having me. My name is Chuck Richards. I'm the Senior Product Manager at Real Geeks for our CRM and automation tools. And basically what that means is I work with our designers and developers to research the market, talk with our customers, and identify areas of opportunity where we can improve our platform to best serve our customer needs.
That's right. So maybe we could simplify that as you turn like business winning ideas into like technology, something like that.
That's right. We try to take what are the ideas and the concepts that are out there and how can we make them tangible, at least in the digital space, so to speak.
Well, why don't we just kick this off with like the super basic question of like, what is automation? Like and we're talking about like automation in regards to what's happening in CRMs, obviously not automation on like manufacturing lines, but talk to us about what automation means to you and, where it's used, maybe even regardless of industry.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. One that is very simple on the surface, but as the technology continues to evolve, it becomes a little bit more complex. So to lay a little context, when we talk about automation within the CRM space, it all ties back to what a CRM is. And we talked a lot about this on that previous episode you were referencing, where the key to remember is CRM stands for Customer Relationship Management. So anything that the system does should help further relationships with customers, which very much includes automation. Now, managing CRMs can sometimes be difficult because a good CRM, regardless of the industry, regardless of the tool, it's going to have a lot of data about, hopefully, a lot of different people. So it can be very time consuming for the user of that CRM to go through each of the contact records and make sure the activity histories are up to date, the statuses are progressing forward, trying to analyze the information to determine who do I prioritize next? What action should I be taking with those people? So when it comes to the automation, it's meant to help the user manage their time, identify the areas of greatest need, and perform both common actions that are repetitive, kind of take that off the person's plate, just let the system handle that by itself. But then also, like I said before, lean into nurturing those relationships by performing key functions that are going to help the person that's using the CRM with their target demographic.
What I'm hearing, and it sounds like you might break it down like this, so a CRM, a customer relationship manager, step one is everything that you know about that person in one spot. And once you've got that, then you start to ask yourself, well, how can I do things like mechanically or at scale? Because if I know that this person needs a certain level of communication every period of time, or I know that they're looking for in the real estate space, houses like this, how do I get a technology that automatically does those communication, those touch points, those reminders all the time? So basically you don't have to. Good summary?
Yeah, it's essentially that old adage of work smarter, not harder, except that the working smarter should enable working harder, just in different ways, so that you're not having to perform repetitive tasks over and over, and not trying to manage keeping straight all this critical information and next step actions by yourself.
Obviously, the man-hour savings is a huge component here. So smaller teams can be way more effective in the marketplace. But, I know maybe I hear stories all the time from, CRM users, marketing automation users, people in the real estate space that are like, oh, my client was so impressed that I was so engaged for X period of time here. Sometimes we hear that number in years before they finally bought with me. Like, can you talk a little bit about like either some of the stories that we hear or, like what's going on in that like nexus between technology and relationship?
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up. I had one of our customers telling me a very similar story just last week. He's been with us for over a decade, and he was explaining to me, Chuck, I have some people that have been in my database for about as long as I've been working with Real Geeks. And I have my automated workflow set up to consistently establish touch points with all of my leads. As long as they're not opting out, they're not unsubscribing, I'm going to continue to reach out to them. There's no expiration date. And he said, I've had people from 9 years back that have come back and said, now I'm ready to buy. Now I'm looking for something in the market, and I appreciate all the information you've been sending me. I knew right away who I was going to turn to. And even people that were not looking to transact themselves, he was telling me that he's had people that he's had on these automated workflows reach out and give him referrals for other people that they knew, friends or family, that had come and asked for recommendations, and they were able to say, yeah, I know this guy who is on top of the market. He knows the ins, the outs. He's very familiar with this area. I'm sure he'd be able to help out. And it was so cool to hear those stories and how the automated tools were empowering those relationships in the background while he was able to focus on, other people that were progressing, in a more visible way to him. The system was able to take care of all these other people and nurture those relationships.
I mean, this is a great point because we hear agents all the time talk about playing a long game, right? But I think that there's a perspective maybe on newer agents or less technically savvy agents that think that like, oh, you're always engaging with this person yourself, like manually for this entire period of time. And so they think about like, oh my God, like a 5-year nurture, like I'm not going to call this person every week for 5 years. I'm like, yeah, you're right. That would be absolutely crazy. But your own personal robot can do that and not break a sweat and, just give you a nice notification when it's like, hey, their behavior pattern changed.
Yeah. And, extending that further, you imagined it would be a lot of work if you were to try to call that person every day or every week for 5+ years playing the long game. Multiply that by every name that you've got in your CRM. There's no way that you could do that for the hundreds, thousands of different leads that you're building up over time. And that, maybe you genuinely do want to establish those connections with, but you just, there's not the time. As you were saying, there aren't those man hours. And so let the system take care of that for you. Now, something else that comes to mind from what you were mentioning there, you've got the people that are saying, I don't know that I can do this, or maybe they recognize there are tools to help and they still have hesitancies. Like, I want to engage with my leads and I want to be interacting with these people. But if I'm relying on a robot, if I'm relying on a system to do it for me, it feels very impersonal. Like I'm not actually the one talking. And that's actually, really not true at all. Yes, maybe the system is sending out the messages, but the really cool thing about a lot of the tools that are out there now is the customization that goes into them. You can create your email templates, your text templates, so that it's your words, it's your messaging, it's your voice. And so what you would want to say to establish connections with these people, the system's not replacing that. It's just magnifying it and making it so that it's possible for you to reach those people at scale.
Well, okay. I think this is a great point to start turning the corner and going from why, obviously the why is being able to nurture people at scale for long periods of time without like even thinking about it. But let's talk about some of the nuts and bolts of like what's actually going on here. And so maybe the first question, which is just like I think a terminology thing that we might use for the rest of the conversation, which is there a difference between automation and workflows? Like what's going on when we talk about these things?
Yeah, that's another interesting question that you can break down on so many different levels. Short answer, I would say something like workflows are automations, but not all automations are necessarily workflows. So in automation, we tend to think about a lot in terms of automated communications. But in the CRM space, a good CRM is going to have a lot of different automations that are built to help save you time. Not only can it automatically distribute emails or texts to your leads, but it should also be helping with the record keeping. Because, the point of the CRM, as I repeat often, nurture those relationships with the people, not nurturing your relationship with your computer. We don't want you to spend a whole lot of time feeling like you're updating contact records, changing statuses. There are a lot of automations in systems that'll take care of all that admin work for you. So when we talk about workflows, even that by itself is used to describe a couple of different things depending on who you're talking to. I talk with agents who describe workflows that are set up to manage the flow of communications in working with leads directly. I talk with a lot of agents who also look at it from the perspective of my workflow is literally the flow of work activities that I as the agent am performing, or that I, as a team lead or broker, have set for my team, like the order of activities I want them performing with each of their prospects. So for us, a lot of the times, I think most frequently we would think about, workflows. It tends to be a little bit more in that first category of the automated communication campaigns or drips that I set up of when a certain set of emails and or texts, videos, other lead facing activities are happening.
So for the purposes of this conversation, when we talk about workflow, we're not necessarily talking about like how you manage your day. We're talking about like a sequence of events that a computer might run when they are like programmatically nurturing someone.
Yeah. And, here and there, maybe we'll toss in some references to, as part of my workflow, I get a new lead that signs up, comes into my system, and I send them a welcome email. I follow up with a text. Maybe there's a step in there where I'm automatically creating a follow-up for myself as the agent. But yeah, for the most part, our discussion, I think that we're looking to concentrate more on sequence of activities for the lead themselves.
Okay. So I'm excited to dive right in because like I said, I really like to nerd out on this stuff. Now, first of all, like we have a guy that's going to be familiar to everyone in the audience, Greg Harrelson, mega agent on the East Coast. He talks about like single action workflows and then draws a big difference between like when he would be using a workflow, which we're, talking about as automation versus when he would do like a blast, right? Like an email blast. And I think that this might also be a good like starting point to start to draw out the differences between these things. So can you talk a little bit about like, blasts versus workflows versus maybe when you might use a quote single action workflow, something like that?
I think what's important to consider is if you're going in and trying to set up workflows, whether you're a first timer or maybe you've had some in place for a while and you're thinking about going back and touching up your system to make some improvements, you want to think about what's the purpose of that workflow. Am I putting someone on a workflow because I want to provide long-term nurture, establish those touch points, make sure that, when they're ready to move forward, I'm top of mind? Or is it something like what you were talking about, sort of short-term, quick action? I'm going to establish a lot of touch points within a relatively short period of time because, we're really trying to strike some engagement. Or you're thinking about one step workflows for these blasts, are usually used for a specific purpose of, I want to communicate something in the now term. Like maybe there's an open house coming up, or maybe I'm sending out a holiday message to wish everybody happy holidays or extend a season's greeting. You want to think about, what's the purpose? Like, what am I trying to accomplish here? If I were to get this lead to respond, what is the conversation I'm looking to have with them? So breaking down each of those, the way that you're going to approach setting up that workflow is obviously going to be dependent on, which of those approaches you're looking to take, right? If I'm trying to manage and strike engagement in the short term, probably going to use a lot more text messages, send a couple videos. Whereas long-term nurture, you don't want to be spamming somebody's phone over and over for a very long period of time. I know we're coming up on election season. We're getting into the summer holidays around Prime Day with different sales happening. So we're all getting those marketing texts right now. And, if you can imagine getting those over a long extended period of time, it's just not going to serve its purpose. So long term, you're using more emails.
Here's a basic question. Like, there's probably someone out there that's like, okay, yeah, this sounds great. I like the whole idea of, using some automation, using some workflows, but I really don't know what to start or where to start. So there's definitely a lot of people that come to us and they're like, I got some great ideas, right? And they're going to want to listen a little bit further into this. But if you just have no idea where to start, is there a library or something like that people can just be like, oh yeah, I just want to cut and paste someone else's?
Oh yeah, and you use the exact right word there. In Real Geeks, we refer to it as the library, where folks can go in, they can see pre-made templates from folks like Greg or other partners who have created these workflows that have been very successful, and they want to share them with the communities. Just across the industry, one thing that I always think is really cool, where yes, there's competition in the space, but I'm continually impressed by the agents out there that try to pay things forward and share lessons that they've learned and put out their best practices, which often include workflows. They post out there in mastermind groups, or they share their own videos or posts that say, hey, this is what worked for me. This is what I found effective in this market or in these circumstances. Here's what I found works for leads who are just not responsive. Here's what I found for leads who say, I'm just browsing now, probably not going to be looking for something seriously another 6, 9, 12 months. A lot of agents out there that are very open and willing to share, templates for these workflows, so that if you're approaching it, as a newbie or somebody who just hasn't looked at it in a long time or feel intimidated by it, you don't always have to start from scratch. And it kind of connects back to that theme of automation that we were discussing earlier. A good system is either going to directly or at least open the channel for you to be able to have some things out of the box so that you're not trying to work off of a blank page.
Actually, I've been super impressed in the real estate space, how willing people are to share their recipes and their secret sauce for what's going on. I mean, sometimes people get a little bit apprehensive if you're in the same market, but if you're not in the same market, people are usually full, open book. Here's what's working for me. Here's what's not working for me. So definitely get into those mastermind groups, go to the conferences and, hang out with people from different spaces. And also, just as a marketing guy, I cannot tell you how invaluable it is to talk to people in other industries. Right. Because you learn so much and think about things from slightly different angles. That gives you a lot of ideas on, new things that you could try and do.
I loved everything that you were saying there, whether it's at conferences in person, you're posting and you're interacting with people online. Just never be afraid to ask. Everybody started out new to this at some point or another. Just, toss the questions out there. Trying to set up my workflows. Does anybody have advice? Or trying to think of an automation for this type of situation? Any good tools that you'd recommend? I'm continuously impressed by how many agents out there are so willing to share and spread these best practices and basically lift one another up. It's really awesome to see. And maybe sometime you ask the question and someone says, "Oh no, that is my secret sauce," but nothing ventured, nothing gained. You certainly not going to hurt anything by asking. And I'd also extend that further to when you do dive in and are experimenting with different workflows and different, whether it's the message templates that are part of your communication campaigns or the cadence and timing of the messages that you send, try things out. You're never locking yourself onto one set path or one set, workflow that you have to stay on. Set up a couple of different workflows. Run your own experimentation. Like, I'm going to subscribe, couple leads to this particular setup, and I'm going to subscribe another couple of leads to this one, and kind of experiment and figure out through a little bit of A/B testing what's going to work best.
So I always want the audience to come away from these episodes with very actionable things that they could like pause, the episode and go do like immediately. So why don't you walk us through some of the basic ways that people use automation in real estate?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about like the advanced stuff. So the advanced people, hang on, we're getting to you. But let's start with the beginners.
Sure. I think if you're looking at first-time workflow, something that you want to try out, you want to look at, what is the, key niche for my market? Am I focusing on new build communities? Am I focusing on first-time home buyers? Whatever it may be, start with where your strengths lie, where your market expertise is. Start to craft a couple of different emails and texts that you would use to strike up conversations with people. Because ultimately, the goal of the workflow is not to get somebody on them and have them go through every step of the campaign. It would be fantastic if you set up a 100-step workflow, which, using extreme numbers for an example here, but just really long workflow, 100 steps, and someone replies after step number 3. Yeah, so what that they never see the other 97 steps? You've achieved your goal. So think about, what are the things that you know best? Where are your strengths? Craft a couple of messages, and then just start to get people subscribed to a small campaign utilizing those messages. Maybe start with one. All right, brand new leads come in through my real estate website.
So Chuck, let me ask you some specifics on this. So basically, the workflow that you're referencing here, you're saying the purpose of this workflow is to get someone to re-engage with you. So maybe it's someone that you've had a call with, or you were never able to get in touch with, right? But like, you want them to re-engage with you. And so I'm like visualizing in my mind, it's like this cadence of emails that are really designed to talk to your niche, your like custom audience, and then like say why they want to keep talking to you. So either they take your call or they reach out to you. And it's really like a sequence of emails designed to bring them back, right?
Yeah, exactly. To bring them back. And I think that that's such a key phrasing because, they've gotten on your radar, they've gotten in your system because, they were there at least a first time, whether you met them at an open house, whether they signed up looking for properties on your website, or they were running a market report looking to sell through you. You want to bring them back, whether as a brand new lead that you're working with for the first time, or, one thing that I find a lot of agents, don't always think about, you've got them on a workflow because they've just recently closed a deal with you, whether it's they bought through you or they sold through you. You've maybe put them on a workflow where you're maintaining contact and touch points. So again, they're coming back to you for a repeat or referral business.
I want to really paint a picture for people that might not be familiar with this technology. Like when we say you've got someone on a workflow or they're on a workflow, is this like magical triggers that put people on, or people manually like saying, I just talked to that customer and they need to be on this workflow? Like paint a picture for the person that like has never seen this type of technology on like how this actually works. Yeah.
I guess the short, straightforward answer to that particular question is, C, all of the above. You can set up workflows leaning full into automations of those magic triggers of, hey, this workflow is going to be subscribed automatically to any new lead that comes in through this generation source. This lead is going to automatically be subscribed based on an action like they favorited a property on my site, or I added a tag to their profile in my CRM. Additionally, maybe sometimes you'll have workflows where you are manually subscribing, thinking back to those, single step blasts that we talked about earlier. Usually those ones are ones that, you're manually subscribing. Like I'm checking a whole list in my table here and I'm bulk adding them to this single step workflow so that I can blast out an update or a holiday greeting that maybe is not part of a longer term campaign they may already be subscribed to.
So to summarize that, like you might have a trigger, which is the technology identifies that a person meets certain criteria, and so that gets added to a campaign, right? And so we might set it up, and I want to ask you about trigger criteria, but let me just kind of finish the thought here. The next ones would be you bulk assign people, into this workflow, like you were saying, a holiday like sequence, something like that. Or individually, like you are working with a person, you're hanging up the phone. That was a great call. I need to make sure that they get on my special sequence for follow-ups in this neighborhood. That kind of a good summary?
Yeah, absolutely. Well said.
Talk to me about triggers. Like, in your technology, like what are, like, I want to get people thinking about like, okay, I got all my Lego pieces around. Like triggers are the start, like the head of this thing. And then there's a bunch of actions. So like what kind of things can trigger a workflow?
Systems out there can use all sorts of different things as triggers. And what's important to consider here is that purpose that we were talking about earlier. Like, what are you trying to do with them? That should be closely tied to your trigger. So is it, I'm trying to engage somebody who signed up through my website. So the signing up action, new lead creation, that's my trigger. So purpose of my campaign is I'm welcoming them to the website, thanking them for checking out the properties that are listed there, inviting them to go visit some of these houses, or inviting them to share more information with me. Alternatively, you might have certain kind of lead-based behaviors that are the triggers, like a lead has favorited a property on a website, in which case the email campaign is, do you want to go see this property? Hey, let me know if you want to chat about similar properties. Hey, let's set up a time to discuss how soon you're looking to get into a house like this. Other systems might have automatic triggers built around status or stage updates. Where are they in your pipeline? Is this someone that's new, that you've attempted contact, somebody that is in nurture stage, or as we referenced earlier, maybe this is somebody who's entered a closed stage where they've signed a contract. And so by moving into that stage, they're automatically triggered into a workflow that's going to give them periodic updates about the neighborhood they just moved into. Where can they find information about the schools where their kids are going to go? Where can they find updates about community events? Or maybe you're giving recommendations to people to help with house projects, handymen, lawn maintenance, those types of things. So you think about, your purpose, your segmentation, and that trigger should be closely tied to serving your ultimate purpose.
I like particularly the triggers that talk about like, okay, they've moved through the pipeline stages, right? Because, earlier you had a great soundbite and it was like, you want to nurture like your relationships, not your computer, right? So you can put yourself in the mindset where you're thinking about your automation, but then on a daily basis, work on nurturing those relationships. And so, I'm just thinking there's so many possibilities of like someone's in the CRM, they're moving people between stages. They don't necessarily need to remember that they have the automation set up that is going to take a hold when the status changes from one to the other. So I call this like dancing together, right? Like your automation should be dancing like with the actions that you're taking as the sales professional.
Yeah, 1000%. And, it's maybe seeming a little daunting to hear us talking about all these things and these moving pieces where it's automations for my statuses and my stages, for my tags, for my workflows, these video triggers. We're talking about a lot of different things, but, a dance is a good analogy where, let the system take care of a lot of that work for you. It shouldn't be stuff that you have to worry about. System's going to automatically update a status based on certain lead activities. Hey, then that's going to automatically set in motion a communication campaign or a workflow. Once that's done, that could signal something else within your system to be working. And I touched on this a little bit earlier, but some of the concerns that people express to me when they hear stuff like that is, well, it feels like I'm removing myself out of the equation, and it's the machine that's taking care of this and not really a person. And that's where I try to encourage people, invest yourself into setting up those automations. It's going to take a little bit of time up front, but it's an investment that's going to pay dividends, because the people that are on the receiving end of these automations and workflows, they'll notice your voice behind it. They'll get a sense for you and your market expertise, and how you can meaningfully contribute to their lives, whether they're looking for a new home now or they're looking to sell a home. Maybe they're just trying to scope out a market, but they'll hear your voice through those communications because you spent the time up front drafting what the messages are, figuring out, what's the right cadence to be distributing these messages. And, the system is only going to enhance your ability to come across more personably. And it ties back to what you were saying, Chris, of they'll be impressed. Man, I can't believe this person thought of me for so long that they continued to reach out to me, week after week, or, I can't believe that they were thinking of me in my situation, that they shared this relevant information about, who should I look at getting to install the fence at my new backyard. Hi, my name's Chuck. I'm one of the product managers here at Real Geeks. The exciting thing about property sharing, it's been a long time feature request. Customers want to be able to very quickly, very easily access key listings to send to their agents. And since the mobile app is all about doing things quickly, efficiently, on the go, we're excited to be able to bring that functionality from the websites into the CRM app itself. So now anytime agents want to send a quick text, send a quick email as they're on the go from one appointment to the next, start composing that email draft or that text draft, click add property, pull up the listing that you want, and then all you have to do is hit go.
All right, Chuck. So we've got two different kind of audiences here. We've got obviously the people that are like thinking about this for the first time. And then we got the advanced guys that are like, yeah, I know that. And okay, like I think that revisiting basic concepts can be good for everyone. I always get good ideas when I revisit the marketing one-on-one, but I really want to dive into some of the crazy things that you've seen customers do. And I know that you've been spending a bunch of time talking to some really heavy hitters in the industry. So I'm wondering if, for the benefit of the more advanced audience, as well as for the people that are new trying to figure out like how deep this pool actually is, what are some of the like crazy workflows that you have heard of that either make a ton of money or are just like complicated and work in surprising ways? Yeah,
that's a really good question. I've heard some things in my time. I think one of the most interesting things that I've heard about from an agent describing his setup was that he was getting very meta with his workflows. He had, of course, workflows that were giving communications out to his leads, but he had also created himself as a test lead in his system. And he was setting up workflows specifically for him to remind him about to-dos for managing his business, for providing follow-ups, or just periodically sending messages to remind him on things, to make sure that he was thinking about upcoming events or things that he had to take care of. And so he was using these automations kind of to, nurture the way that he was managing himself. That was one interesting thing that I heard someone tell me about recently. As far as the folks that have been most successful with this, I'd say these are the ones who don't necessarily think of workflows as set it and forget it. Can you create a workflow or a small series of workflows and kind of sit back and let the machine do the work, so to speak? Sure, that's an approach and it can be effective. But the ones that I think are most successful are the ones who periodically come back and they update the content of the emails that are being sent. They tweak the text messages. They're the ones who look at the different types of workflows, relevant to what you were describing earlier of, all right, I've got my long-term nurture workflow set up so that I'm always maintaining contact with somebody. I've also got my medium or my short-term workflows where I'm going to be sending a lot of messages in the near term, just really trying to get this engagement up front, really trying to capture someone's business. And then they also come in and they've got the blasts that they'll do, something that's a single step that maybe is messaging not particular to, a longer campaign flow that you've got set up where all of the messages are related to one another, but just sort of, quick update. Hey, want to let everybody know about an open house at this property. Thought you'd be interested in, or, wishing everybody happy holidays. So those most successful agents are the ones that they're looking for ways to utilize each of the different kind of campaign styles, so to speak. I think that it's something else that's been very successful for a lot of agents are the ones that are looking at their pipeline, not just as starting to nurture somebody at an entry point when they're brand new and seeing them all the way through when they close and saying mission accomplished. They're the ones who are kind of using a cycle of workflows to support their cycle of business. Someone maybe starts out new and they go through their nurture stage and ultimately close. But then you want to start nurturing again for that repeat and referral business. And so you've got your workflow set up to help provide messaging and touch points that are going to be very relevant to those people as they are looping back around the cycle until they're either ready to sell that home that they just bought with you a couple years down the road, or else recommend friends, family, other people that they say, hey, I had such a great experience with her. She's going to provide the best support, customer service, and market expertise. I want to make sure anybody I know is going to work with her. So to summarize, I guess I'd say the most successful people are the ones that they stay engaged with their workflows. They know when it's appropriate to come in, make some changes, make edits. They've got a variety of messages and campaigns set up. And then they use that to enhance the relationships that they're building.
Absolutely. I mean, and you reminded me of a couple of things in there. So, first, don't be afraid to try things out, and I want to maybe talk about this in two ways. Occasionally my team will ask, well, how did you figure that out in, insert marketing tool here? I'm like, well, I was just brave enough to push the buttons until I figured it out. You don't know until you know, and now I know. And so sometimes you just got to push the buttons and see what happens on the other side. But then I think the second thing is, in a lot of situations, people are afraid of like pushing communication out to the world to see what happens, right? But if you think about like even the way that you maybe do cold calling, like you've got to smooth out your talk track, right? And you're going to get better and you're going to refine like what works for what people and how exactly you approach each individual conversation. And your creative, AKA the words that you use in your email and your text messages is largely going to be the same. And so you don't want to get like perfect being the enemy of learning stuff, right? And I'll twist that quote a little bit. Because it's really, and this is the other thing that I think you're saying here, like kind of part two, I see a lot of like the really pro agents are working in what I call like an optimization cycle. So they are creating stuff that's kind of like the creative phase where it's like blank, canvas, like doing stuff, right? Not being afraid to try, just pushing buttons to see what works. They let it soak, right? So you're going to have to let a marketing campaign or an automation run for a while and then see people come through it to see if it's working, right? So that's kind of the execution phase. But then you need to come back to it and you need to say, well, is it working or isn't it not working? And based off the feedback that you're getting, how are you going to tweak it? So it's not throwing it out and starting over. It's optimizing. It's making incremental improvements. And maybe the third thing I'd add on to this, which again, I see like the really pro agents doing is they'll set aside time. You set call blocking time for making your morning calls or whatever you're going to do, however you do that. Well, call block, once a week, once a month. It really depends on how many leads or contacts you're talking about here for revisiting your workflows and going through and saying, okay, which workflows are working, which workflows are not. If you don't have a lot of people in your CRM, then maybe it needs to be monthly. If you've got, 100,000 people in your CRM, maybe it's worth doing twice a week. So it just varies depending on you.
Yeah. And I want to go back and I want to highlight, circle, bold, underline what you were saying about, learning and not being afraid to try things. I hear this all the time with people that they first sign up with Real Geeks and they're trying to get their website set up and they want to design it all out and they want to have it perfect before they start sharing it. Similarly, sometimes they get in and they're configuring their CRM and they want to have it perfect before they start sharing it with their teammates to use. It's the same thing with these workflows. They say, I want to have the campaigns, laid out. It's got to be perfect. And you start to ask someone, well, why? Well, if it's not, then they're going to say no. They're not going to engage. And, there you have to point out, well, if you're not sending them anything, it's an automatic no. They're not engaging because there's nothing to engage with. And so there's nothing to lose and everything to gain for those people that you're going to start to establish contact with. And you know what? If they say no, that's just more that you're learning how to adjust your campaigns and how to improve them to garner that engagement and be better with it going forward.
Okay, I want to we'll transition again into like maybe part 3 of this conversation, which is like best practices and traps. So the first question, and I think we were talking about it just now, so this is a great segue. Are workflows really set it and forget it, or do they require, care, feeding, maintenance, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I have been guilty in the past of saying yes, you can set it and forget it. And on a baseline level, sure, but we were talking a little bit earlier. The most successful agents, you don't set it and forget it. You come back from time to time, you improve the messaging, you apply your learnings. Maybe you make the content more relevant if it's a changing market, or, you're making some updates. Like I used to have a workflow to invite people about some new build communities in the area. Well, over time, you're going to have to highlight a different set of communities, or maybe you want to go back because you've included some videos in some of your messages and you just want to keep things fresh. You want to update them. And those are the most successful agents, the ones that, you don't set it and forget it. Maybe you set it, you let it run for a time, but then you always circle back and you make your improvements and your updates.
I think it's such a hard one to answer because it's like, yeah, there are some that you probably will set and you probably shouldn't forget about, but you might not touch frequently.
Yeah.
But then there are going to be the workflows that everyone goes through, and you should probably be paying pretty close attention to what's happening with those.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be clear, I don't think Chris or I are recommending that workflows are something that you have to come back and tweak on a day-to-day basis. But, maybe you come back and you think about them, every other week or monthly, or at least, maybe once a quarter. You're thinking about your automations because you do want them to be automated. If you're tweaking them every day, yeah, that's kind of killing the whole premise behind automation.
Right, exactly. And we're talking about tweaking. Like there's no secret magical sauce here. I'm not saying like, oh, you go into the code and you understand, and you look for the whatever. It's like, are you getting what you want out of this thing? Right? If no, all right, what can we change and make better? If yes, all right, maybe not touch it. Right? Like, but it's just being like conscious about that process.
That's a great word for it. Yeah, absolutely. You stay conscious about it.
Yeah. Okay. Length. Earlier, you're like, it's the 100-day workflow or 100-message workflow, or, we talk about like nurturing people for years. How long is too long? Is there such a thing? Or, what's the trap / best practice here?
I don't believe that there is such thing as a too long workflow, but I'm going to put an asterisk on that. There is such thing as a too long workflow that's meant to garner short-term engagement, where I'm sending, a text every day. If you're doing that for an extended period of time, that's going to get rolled real fast, and you're going to get those opt-outs, those stops, those unsubscribes. But as far as setting up a long game, nurture campaign where you're sending out a periodic email, like a monthly check-in, or maybe you've got it set for every other month. Or maybe you've got someone that goes on a workflow for a year with periodic emails, and then they either go back through a cycle or you move them over to another longer workflow. I don't think that there's any too long in that regard. Was talking with somebody recently, and he was telling me about how he had people come back to him years down the road, and he had this long-term nurture work campaign that for him was kind of a set and forget. He had set the content up, and it was sort of evergreen material as part of those messages just to establish the touch points. And he would have people reply. It didn't matter that it had been going on for years. There were people that he said he honestly didn't remember who exactly they were because it had been so long since he'd met them. But having those touch points that made the difference because it kept him top of mind for those people when they were ready to move forward. And what he said to me was, Chuck, there's never really an end to a workflow, because if I say my workflow is done, that means I'm not communicating with them anymore. I've stopped reaching out, or, interpreted a different way. I've given up. I've stopped caring. And I'm never going to not care about potential clients. I'm never going to not care about my business. Therefore, there's never really an endpoint to my communication campaigns trying to reach out to people.
How about something like, we talked about too long, too short, like what about like targeted, like too targeted versus too broad, and we're talking about sweeping generalizations here, but have you picked up any like best practices on, what audience size or targeting should look like?
Ooh. Yeah, I'm going to use a word that you brought up earlier, and that's a dance. It's kind of a dance with your market, trying to figure that out. Sometimes it can vary, a little bit. Am I targeting too niche a demographic versus am I just too broad, where people can tell, yeah, this is just a message that's going to go out to everybody. It's not really relevant to me. He's casting a wide net here. Do some experimentation. Try to figure out, where is that sweet spot? I think that when it comes to the campaigns that are the single steps or the blasts, that could go either direction. Maybe you're sending an update to people about an open house for a property that meets their criteria. And so necessarily it's going to be a smaller target segment that are looking for those types of homes. Versus if it's just a broad greeting, market update, holiday wish, that could be to everybody. And people aren't put off by that because, they know that you're going to reach out to everybody to wish them happy holidays. For a long-term nurture campaign, that one's probably going to be a little bit more of a broader audience. Whereas a short-term, hey, new leads coming in, I'm going to have more frequent follow-up activities with them. Those ones you probably want to keep a little bit smaller because, the goal to striking early engagement is to establish a connection, to show what they're looking for, to show you understand their needs. And so those are going to necessarily need to be a little bit more targeted, so smaller segments.
Right. Okay. So that makes a lot of sense. Right tool for the job is like the short answer to that. Like you target it how it needs to be. And I'm sure there's someone out there that's like, well, that's not super helpful, but it actually is. Like you're just going to have to like experiment and get it right. Okay. So next one, which I think is the one that like we always want to aim for, which is like, do you have any tips or have you seen any best practices for making the automation feel less automated and more personal?
One of the things that I've seen from some really cool agents is incorporation of video, where they will include links in whether it's a text message or an email, where they're introducing themselves, where maybe they show some highlights of the market or maybe some highlights of the community to kind of entice and invite people and persuade them, yeah, this is where you want to look. Hey, this is something that I think will meet your needs. That's something I think's been really awesome and can really garner a lot of engagement.
Okay, let's move on to the final phase here, which is like forecasting out into the future. Everyone wants to know like what's the next cool thing, coming down the pipe. So when you think about like the future of automation, you're in this space, you're sitting with the technology guys. Like, what are you guys thinking about?
Ooh, for us, we think a lot about efficiency. We want to have our agents spending less time needing to maintain a system and make manual updates, more time focusing on those relationships. Something that agents tell me over and over is, we're people. Yes, maybe a lot of us understand the technology and how to use it, and we'll go into the weeds to understand it and learn the best practices. But ultimately, we're servicing people. I had an agent just last week telling me that she's a people person. That's where her strengths lie. For her, yeah, I'm going to invest some time having to figure out this tech to support the business, but it's all about those relationships. Get me out there, get me talking with people, get me engaged with them. So for Real Geeks and others, when we talk about what does the future of workflows look like, it's how can we further improve the efficiency so that it's spending less time having to update things or change things on the platform, make it do the work for you so that you get those contact points and you can take over being people engaging with them.
So you're not going to share the Real Geeks roadmap with us?
I think that, maybe we'll schedule a follow-up if we want to do an in-depth analysis of the Real Geeks roadmap. But we're thinking about a lot of things out there.
I was looking for the scoop, Chuck, like before anyone else. Like, what's the next thing that's going to land?
Oof. I will tease a little bit that workflows and automations are front and foremost in our mind. We've spent the last couple of months working on some improvements to our system to lay the foundation for what's to come. So Real Geeks customers can look forward to some improved user experiences within our automation section and the tools that we use to create these workflows. And then from there, we are excited to start executing on our roadmap list of substantial updates for things, we talked about triggers, what kicks off a workflow, looking at filters for, all right, once a workflow is kicking off, who is it targeting? Thinking about some of those kind of things.
Okay. Last question. And I would be remiss as a host if I didn't ask this question, especially in the current environment. But, the whole industry, whole world, only wants to talk about AI. So, as you guys are thinking about, what's going on with AI, what's going on in automation, are there any changes you see out there in the immediate future or far future? How do you think this is going to land?
AI very much a key player in the future of so many things, but certainly workflows and automations, the way that it can analyze data and go through complex databases of information and activities, ways that it can target opportunities and even, help with communications, what do you say? So I maybe tease a little bit for some of the things we're thinking about, connecting back to earlier when we were saying, think about the message you want to convey to your market, think about, who you want to target. We're looking at how we can, utilize AI to help answer some of those questions. But I'd also have to offer there, some assurance to people that might feel, well, is this thing really just going to replace my role in this if it's, performing all the work for me? Well, no. The agent is still a very integral part because it's your business. Nobody knows your people the way that you do. Nobody's going to be able to speak the way that you do. So, the AI is a tool. You can train it to speak how you want it. You can train it to represent your business in the way that you want it to and to focus on the goals that you set for it. So it's just something else along with these automations that are a tool meant to enhance your ability to connect with people, not to replace key parts of forming those relationships.
I like that. For those of you that have run into me at trade shows and we've had this chat, I'm bullish on humanity. So, I think it's going to be a powerful tool, but definitely not replace anything. I think our world might change, but, hopefully just empower us to do more of what we're already doing. So, Chuck, this has been awesome. I hope everyone got what they needed out of this. And if you have questions, make sure that you go down into the comments section below and leave us comments. Same thing. If you're watching this on Facebook, YouTube, wherever, leave us comments. We read absolutely all of those. If you don't have anything to say in the comments, then just give us a thumbs up and a subscribe. That works too. Chuck, any final thoughts before we sign off?
I'll continue right there along with what you were just saying. Let us know in the comments, questions that you have. Let us know feedback that you've got. We were talking earlier about how we see people so generously sharing their best practices and ideas for workflows. Toss those down in the comments below. Let's get some good conversation going.
How can people contact you?
You can reach out to me, charles.richards@realgeeks.com. Always happy to answer questions and, connect, meet with people, hear your ideas, hear your needs, and, ways that we can leverage some of these emerging technologies to address those opportunities.
Sounds great. Well, Chuck, thanks again for another awesome episode. And to the audience, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.